welcome to another episode of Literary Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms. If it's written work, it's game. Let's meet the panel.
Casey.
I'm Maya.
I'm Sara.
And I'm Josh. I feel like this is ABBA's Take a Chance on Me video. Only our spots would be rotating. I want to welcome Casey back. Casey has been on throughout the regular season. Sara, I want to welcome you back to the panel.
Thank you.
I am honored and privileged to have one of BookTube's hottest and finest new contributors. One of the best people to come to BookTube during these challenging times was you.
Thank you so much. It's so nice.
Today we are going to be going over March, book 1 by John Lewis, the late representative from the state of Georgia. And I thought I would kick off with a discussion starter. Was there anything in particular that stood out to you as far as John Lewis's participation and experience in the civil rights movement was concerned? Did you learn anything new about the topic at hand?
I just want to say off the bat, this was so delightful. The art, the writing, all of it was so great, and it told such a wonderful story about him, and it was so personable. It didn't just list and illustrate facts that happened in a timeline of history. It told so much about his childhood and who he was as a person and the reasons why he acted and was so wonderful as he was all integrated in his childhood and just him as a person. But something that I didn't know about him was the chicken preaching. So the chicken part was my absolute favorite in this. Not only it just showed how just kind and gentle he was as a human being, naming all the chickens. And I think thinking back to my childhood, and probably a lot of people can agree, you get very attached to your pets, even like stuffed animals. You name everything that you have. And he named all of his chickens, and they were so precious to him. And the heartbreak he had to go through when it was time for dinner and how he wouldn't eat them. And Nate illustrated the chickens, their faces all differently with their personalities, so they looked distinct. And I thought that was just really fun and entertaining to look at all the faces.
I think it was especially delightful when you had them in various situations. You would be able to see the emotions of the chickens. The one that he baptized to the point that he thought he baptized it a little too hard, but then left it out in the sun and miraculously came back to life. I agree with you completely that the him preaching to the chickens and him raising the chickens was such a delightful aspect to his growing up. And it also showed that he wasn't as aware of exterior atmosphere. It would have such a huge impact on what he would do throughout the years in his life.
I loved this. It was a pleasure to read. And to me, what stood out, apart from the fact that I learned a lot more about how much he was involved in the nonviolence movement, to me, what really stood out was his trip with his uncle to the northern states. And I just thought that was such an interesting account. I recently watched The Green Book, just because I'm trying to go through all the best pictures. And I was able to connect the book a lot to what I had just seen on the screen because of the bathrooms they were able to stop at and be safe at, and the hotels and things like that. And I just thought that the account of his trip and how it changed him and his perspective was really fascinating and interesting to read about.
I agree. The intensity of going through each of the states and then finally feeling a sense of relief when he got to Ohio, and then how he was much more delightful in New York, where his uncle lived, and he had all of these pleasant experiences with his aunts, distant relatives. It was really opened up his mind, and it really contributed to what he would do later on. And I especially learning about the sit-ins was also quite extraordinary. When they'd go to Woolsworth and they would just sit, they didn't expect to be served. They would just be there. And as soon as they were rejected, they would get up and walk out. just to make a clear statement that they were just going to keep doing this, and nobody was going to, and they were just going to keep doing it until they would get a response. And eventually it got to that point. Maybe not within this text, but
at first I got confused because in there they were calling each other names and things of that sort. And I'm thinking, why would you do that to someone who's with you? And then I realized that they were doing that to train each other to not respond and react to the hatred. I'm sure there was more than one, but I like how honest he was, where how the one person said, I can't do this. I'm sorry. I just cannot do this with you guys. I'll support you and, blah, 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 but I cannot do this. Nina Simone said that to Martin Luther King Jr., that I'm fighting, but I can't do nonviolent. I can't do peace. And I know some people were like, yeah, I can't do this. But the thing about the chickens that I recognized is immediately when he's talking about the chickens, my first thought was he was going to talk about how raising chickens caused him to be a vegan. But he didn't do that. Later, we found out he said when he went to a restaurant, because he had no connection to the chicken, he had no problem eating it. And I realized that's why there's so much hatred and so much jealousy and so much criticism and bullying, because we don't make connections with one another. So we don't have a problem throwing each other in the fire and eating each other, and it's not just skin color. If you see someone with the tattoos in the wrong spot or too many ear piercings, red, yellow, and green hair, immediately we throw them away before we even get a chance to sit down and connect with them. And so I thought that was, I don't know if that's what the book was trying to say, but for me, I picked that up, that's why there's so much craziness, because no one wants to make a connection with anyone. They just want to judge as soon as they see them.
That's a human flaw that we need to address even today. And I think that sometimes people have the tendency to judge as a defensive mechanism, because they have that feeling that other people are going to, before somebody else can judge them, they need to do the judging. I think that the way that Lewis approached this was very creative in how he tied it into an interaction that he had when he was getting ready for Barack Obama's inauguration on January 20th, 2009, and how he was interacting with a mom and her two sons, telling them the story that way. Encounters are very clever, even though I think I've seen it a little bit better, such as, has anybody read Mouse by Art Spiegelman? It's a great graphic text. It has to do with Spiegelman's father's experiences in Nazi Germany, and he was a Holocaust survivor. And he's a comic writer, so Jewish people were mice, the Germans were cats, and everybody was a different background. But I feel that he incorporated the storytelling experience and the humor so memorably that it's very challenging to reach that pinnacle that he set. And I feel that this work didn't do it as well, even though it did do a halfway decent job. But what I did like is how you have the use of the garble, where you'll sometimes see a bubble with like scribble. That was very clever, where it's pretty much that idea that sound is coming out of their mouths, but you can't really interpret it.
Yeah, something you're not really supposed to know what they're saying. You just know they're saying something.
Yeah, they're just, and that's very much our encounters with people too.
I also liked how, I'm trying to find specific examples of it, but there was cursive writing for the speech bubbles. I'm trying to remember where it was from, but it really differentiated what was being said. I can't find it now. But the various different changes in text was really nice, and the font that was picked and the type size that was picked was just really nice. Just overall, like, once I finished this, I was ready to order the next one. Like, I just wanted to keep reading. Like, I didn't want it to end.
When he preaches, he was preaching the Beatitudes, and that's where the cursive was being used.
Yes, okay.
I think it's supposed to emphasize a very strong and powerful message that he's trying to convey. Yeah, I definitely would like to look into the second and the third book. And then he goes even further with a book called Run, which is post-civil rights movement.
Something else that I noticed was the shape of the bubbles. So specifically at the beginning, the police would have their speech bubbles in a jagged sort of circle, whereas the peaceful protesters would be in just a smooth, typical speech bubble shape. And I thought that was really impactful in showing not only the tone, but the volume and the implications of the speech.
Yeah, I agree with that. The jagged bubbles specifically were when they were talking on the megaphones, but that was pretty much the only way they really communicated.
I
You had the
missed that.
garble too.
I didn't
That's at the
notice
very
that.
beginning. To me, that really came off like like in the movies where you start in medias res and then you go to the actual scene itself. I mean, in his case, it started in the present day and then he recollected into the past, which that you also see a lot in forms of media. Does anybody else have anything that really stuck out to them?
The boycotting, the fact that they were capable of going almost a year to get their point across. I don't think people today really took the time to research the history to understand how they actually got what they got. Peace was what got it in the first place. I know it's difficult to give peace and love in the midst of hatred and chaos, but you can only reap what you've sown. And so if you don't want the same hatred, you can't keep sowing. So I think this is a great book for, I would say, especially people who say they're not a reader, they don't like to read, because it's simple, it's easy, it has pictures, so it's not that long, and it's interesting. Like I said, like Sarah said, the chicken part is what stuck out to me the most, because when I didn't even know what March 1 was, I didn't even understand anything until I got the book. And I was like, oh, so I'm thinking, boycott sit-ins, but the chicken part was not what I was expecting, and it really grasped my interest because I was more focused on the chickens than the actual point of the book, which like I said, I think the chicken part was very important, that when gain a relationship with someone, you're more likely to not hate on them. But I definitely think this is a great way for non-readers to start understanding how interesting reading can be if you have the right book, because it's not too long. Like I said, it has pictures, it's very interesting, and it really opened up my eyes and my ears and my understanding. Truly believe if people read this more, it would cause them to rethink everything that's going on now.
And I can't agree more with the fact that this is an easy read. I think one can finish this in one sitting, let alone one day. And it's easy to read through it in order to prepare. I can also agree completely with the fact that the chicken story was so engaging and that he presented it so well, as much of an aspect as we should know, but at the same time, not making the story about him being a chicken preacher.
Right.
I think that the way that he summed it up, because the boys were wondering if the constant deaths were the reason that he stopped. It wasn't, because to him, or he knew that it was a part of death was a part of the life cycle, but that has a lot to say about everybody, regardless of their background or their race or their gender or whatnot. When they get older, the world broadens, both physically and emotionally, and also opportunistically, where people their values change a little bit more. They begin to develop different interests. They begin to come across other kinds of people, different people in general. At the end of the day, we are all individuals. We are all entitled to the same kind of respect and love. And I think that John Lewis was able to really demonstrate that testament in what he was fighting for. And this covering the first 20 years of his life, which he got a lot done.
Probably my favorite quote from the graphic novel was, "Fury spends itself pretty quickly when there's no fury facing it." That was kind of during the sit-ins where they were being beaten, and how, like Casey said, they practiced calling each other names, insulting each other. They had to love whoever was hating them. And, if you're being beaten by someone, you just have to let them hurt you. If you're doing a peaceful protest, that requires so much discipline and just so much. I wouldn't be able to do that. That's terrifying and incredible at the same time.
I think that when you're placed in the situation that he's in, where we're being brought down just for who he is, I think that for him, fighting was the best opportunity for him to move forward. And by fighting, I mean in a nonviolent, peaceful way. He was talking about a librarian that he had when he was growing up. That was a very joyous story to hear. His how he got into reading primarily the magazines and the journals, articles, because the great equalizers is the library system and the ability to read and enjoy reading. I know with libraries, anybody from any class can rent a book as long as they have a library card.
They have it on your phones now.
Oh, you got that too?
Oh, yes.
I think the physical book, there's more magic to it.
No, I mean library card.
Oh, library card on the phone. Okay.
I have my library card on my phone.
I like to own my books a bit more than go to the library, but I just think the library in general is a great aspect to society.
It's just sad that most of society don't know it yet. It's still one of the most emptiest places that should be the most filled places. I mean, I hate it when people say education is so expensive. And it's like, well, college is expensive, but there are other ways to be educated. And the library is the best way because you get to decide what you're being educated, how much of it you receive, and when you receive it. And it's all free. Whereas college, they tell you what they're going to teach you. And if they decide not to teach you something, you won't know it.
Oh, I can't agree more. I think that's the great thing about the library is it gives you the resources so that you can think for yourself. Because I know that in colleges, they have that tendency to, they want you to think the way that they feel. Not all the time, but yeah.
Well, if you're dealing with a professor who has tenure, they can teach what they want, when they want, how they want. And sometimes not everything they teach is truth, and it's not always, it's usually one-sided. So you don't really get to see all the viewpoints that a library can show you. So, or a bookstore. For those who like to keep their books.
But I think one of the great things about the county in which Casey, Sarah, and I live is that there is a library in every municipality, not just every township, but also borough, and they even have reading centers in the little nooks and crannies. So
that's amazing.
It's so nice.
We're also, I don't know if it's true, but we might be the only county in New Jersey where the libraries are connected. So if there's a book I want and it's not in my town, I can request it in another town and they'll send it to me. I don't have to actually go to that library. So when I found that, I was like, what? This should be that should be in every county.
Yeah, I agree.
I thought it was everywhere, but it's not. It's just here.
And you can get one book. I mean, there's probably others too. You can get one.
It should be every county though.
I agree. But yeah, you can also get a book from one library and you can return it to any of the libraries within the system. So
and then they'll take care of it for you.
My town isn't as big. I probably own more books than that library, but still.
I'm sure you do. I've seen his library.
Fantastic. Yeah, we have a library, and it's a decent library, but it sounds like you have a really amazing system there.
Yes, we do have a very amazing system. I mean, yeah, the Tom's River one is pretty big. It's
yes, that one is huge.
That's 2 floors, and we've actually filmed there, so that's always been a delight. So do we have any final thoughts about March Book 1?
You should read it and read it through, and then read it again second time, except just look at the pictures, and then read it all together again one more time. Because you notice little things through different read-throughs, but it's really, really delightful. Whether you enjoy comics or graphic novels, you'll like this. I assure you, it's really great. Like, I read a lot of comics, graphic novels, things like that, from superheroes to cartoons, and I would put this at the top of my list. This was really great.
I wouldn't say it's my favorite graphic text that I've ever read, but I think it really informed me a great deal about John Lewis, gave me that sense of humanity to somebody who has been a public servant for quite some time. He sadly passed away in July 2020. he's become a legendary figure. He's a member of the Big Six as far as the Washington March is concerned. Somebody that marched alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and others. He's the last of that generation, and I think it's just a great way to inform people through this medium. And I think it's pretty clever because with the graphic, as a graphic memoir, he's reaching out to not just an avid reading audience, because us as avid readers, we're going to be open to reading many mediums, but there's people that graphic texts appeal to them, and not so much a general memoir, because we see a lot of them.
Apart from just the historical significance and the significance considering current events, like you both said, Sarah and Josh, it's just very accessible. I don't really read many graphic novels, but I'm an aspiring filmmaker, and I felt like this was the perfect combination of my two passions, because I could watch it play out as though it were a film, but also read it and read more into it than you can with a film. So I would definitely recommend it.
No, I was just going to say this is my favorite graphic novel out of all the ones I've read. But the thing is, I've only read two. So I don't.
What was the other one?
I could get an opinion. The other one that you had us reading.
Jimmy Corrigan. Of course.
Yes.
I'm reading that right now, and
you're having trouble, aren't you?
It is so pretentious. It's like Chris Ware is trying to intentionally boggle our minds. He's very Joycean, where he's saying that you should be of a certain caliber if you want to read this. Not to mention that it's long. Back to March, book one. I think a lot of the cinematic strategy that was used in this piece, I think a lot of credit is due to the people that wrote and illustrated this, because even though this is John Lewis's story, he shared the story with Andrew Aden and Nate Powell, and they put this together. Aden was the one that wrote the story, the sequence, and Powell was the one that did the images. A lot of credit goes to them as well. But I think that the fact that John Lewis contributed his story, it doesn't take the path of works like when you see The Blind Side in film. Michael Orr had said that there were particular details that were not true, and some of that was changed up to make it look cinematically appealing.
Unfortunately, every biopic does that. They all added stuff that didn't actually happen for drama purposes.
Yeah.
And then they're also looking to bring attention to their A-list stars. Let's go clockwise and rate this graphic text on a scale of 0 to 5 stars with half stars permitted. We'll start with you, Sarah.
I would have to go definitely at least 4.5. I really enjoyed all of it. All of the visual storytelling, the lighting and shadows were really dynamic. They varied the camera angles, really nice illustration. It was all just great, along with the actual words and storytelling was very engaging and kept me reading the whole time. So yeah, definitely 4.5 stars.
I don't know. Between a 4.5 and a 5, because it kept my attention. Even when I put it down, I was waiting to get back to it. It caused me to open up to think differently, and it also caused me to engage in research to further, because obviously it doesn't tell you everything and it cuts off. It's book one. So it caused me to research further into the situation. So definitely interesting, the images, the illustration, the story. I thought all three of them together did an amazing job.
I gave it between a 4 and a 4.5 just because I really want to finish the entirety of it. I want to see how not only the story but the artwork plays into one another. And I always reserve my ratings for series that I want to finish because I like to judge them as both a whole and an individual. But this was an incredible book and very high rating for sure.
I'm going to give it a 4. I think that this was a insightful story. I think I learned much more about the topic at hand, which is John Lewis's life. It took a very clever approach to its artistic merit. I also feel that I've seen this structure before. Prior structures have been better. That doesn't take away from the power of Lewis's life experiences and the way that he put it on paper. It was powerful, and I feel that powerful, and also the fact that you can read and enjoy it so quickly. I want to thank everybody for taking part in our very first Zoom discussion.
Hey.
If we ever had to do this more frequently, I'm much more comfortable doing it now. I was wondering if I was going to be mute or if I would be booted off by my internet connection, but it went well. And I want to thank you, Casey, for taking part. Sara, it's great to have you, especially you, Maya, who you can find Maya on her BookTube channel, Be Spectacled. It is really starting to boom. By the time this video goes up, it's probably going to be an empire.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
You deserve it. Was there anything you wanted to say about your channel that viewers of Literary Gladiators should know?
Sure. I love to talk about diversity in books. That's really important to me because I feel that literature is a really key element of developing empathy. So my channel's mostly focused on diversity in books and innovative education. I'm working on making the English curriculum at my high school a little bit more inclusive because I'm tired of reading Catcher in the Rye.
Good for you.
It's sad that that's been on the list since 1875. It's like, can we? There's been thousands of authors that's published books. Why do they still have the same exact books?
Yes, they sure do. They sure do. So yeah, that's my channel, and feel free to check it out.
Oh, absolutely. I've been checking out your channel. I think the two of you should be checking out the channel too.
Did.
Yeah, I can't agree more with the fact that there should be a greater sense of diversity within the curriculum. And I also feel that we should be even things out a bit too, because one of the great misfortunes is that particular people from various backgrounds, like females, are very underrepresented once you go past, say, 1800. I have a collection of ancient Greek female writers and poets. Sappho is one of the few that really had a little bit left, but there's some of them, and unfortunately, a lot of them are fragments. That's all they have remaining, and it's sad. But
not recorded in history.
But you got to bring attention to what you can find too. That's part of what makes the incorporation of diversity in literature.
Thank you to Josh, because you do, your books are always diverse, and not just in people, the authors, but in genres as well. I would not be the reader I am today if it had not been for this group.
It means a lot. Thank you so much, Casey. It's my pleasure to be able to incorporate. I think that the motto, if it's written work, it's game, is something that I like to adhere by. Be sure to join us next time for another episode of Literary Gladiators. And for now, keep reading.
Hi everybody, it's Jessie, and next time on Literary Gladiators, we're going to talk about The Terror by Dan Simmons, one of my favorite books. We're going to have Larry, Ari, Josh, and myself all in a very in-depth discussion, and I hope you like it. Also, don't forget to support us on Patreon, and we'll see you then. Keep reading.